right, it's our election studios where we'll bring you all the information you need to know about the election going on in 29 states where governorship elections will hold. Don't forget the area council elections in Abuja as well. We also have the supplementary elections as well in some states. But let's just shed some light on this. We've got Oluwole Osaze Uzi of INEC. He joins us from our studios in Abuja to give us some background information concerning those area council elections and then the supplementary elections. What do we expect? Mr. Uzi, thank you for joining us today on The Verdict. So give us this background. Yes, lots of people usually know what to expect when it comes to the governorship elections in different states and state houses of assembly elections, but the ones for the supplementary elections, could you shed some light? What do we expect? Where will they happen?
Yeah, thank you. There are supplementary elections in about 14 states, if I recall correctly. And basically, these arose out of the violence, especially for areas where elections could not take place 2 weeks ago, on the 23rd of February. So they are National Assembly elections, contrary to speculation in some areas that it included the presidential elections. It does not include the presidential. It's for Senate and House of Reps. I think there's 7 senatorial seats and 24 House of Representative seats cut across the country. Because of generally violence, but because we could not conclude the elections in all parts in terms of the margin of difference between the leading candidate and the second person, the runner-up, is such that the areas where elections did not take place, the total number of registered voters can make a difference to the final outcome of the elections. So in accordance with Section 26 of the Electoral Act, we have to go back to conduct supplementary elections or make-up elections in order to return the winner. So it's until we conclude that we cannot make a declaration or return a winner in those elections. So it's cut across several states. Lagos is one of those states, Anambra, Rivers, of course, I think Imo, several states. And those are the states the local offices of INEC have let them, the electorate know where it's going to take place right across the country. As for the FCT, usually it's a 3-year tenure for the chairman and councillors of the FCT. The FCT, as you know, is the only territory, the only place where INEC conducts local government elections. But here we call them area council elections because you don't have local governments in the FCT. You have 6 area councils. And they're going to choose 6 chairmen and I think 62 councillors for on Saturday. This time it coincides, the 3 years coincides with the general elections, so we decided to fix them on the same day because there's no House of Assembly in Abuja, and of course no governor. So while in the other 36 states there'll be House of Assembly election, 29 states there'll be governorship elections, in the area councils it'll be the FCT area council elections for chairmen and councillors. Okay,
so for the states, for instance, now my colleague Gimba was talking about some card readers that were reported missing. I think about 63 of them in Bayelsa. What information do you have for us on that?
Well, I don't have much information, quite honestly, so I cannot speak on what I don't know. But I know that some card readers are missing. The circumstances of their loss, I cannot tell. But it's not unusual. Several of our card readers have been stolen, have been burnt, have been destroyed. We lost a lot of materials in the last election, the 23rd of February election. We lost a lot of materials. And but the idea is that once materials are lost, we go back to our stores and look for the spares and replace these card readers. So there's no way that those the missing card readers will be used or has any benefit to anybody. I think it probably hoodlums and destroy the things. The essence of it is this. Card readers are configured for specific days. That's why when the elections were postponed, for example, we had to go back and reconfigure all the card readers because it's configured to work on a particular date, start working at 8 a.m. and cease working probably 6 p.m. or 10 p.m. depending on how it's configured. So we have until last couple of days not configured the card readers against tomorrow. But now they are all configured for tomorrow. Those 62 are not part of the card readers that were configured.
Ms. Ozi, one major concern drawing from the presidential elections and how you were able to conduct that was the starting time for the elections, which ought to start by 8 o'clock. How ready are you to start tomorrow by 8 o'clock on the dot? Because from the failures of yesterday, there are some states that are still having received their sensitive and non-sensitive materials. Some states are still complaining that as of yesterday, they still hadn't gotten some of the materials from you. Have you clarified all of that by this morning, or will you clarify all of that by later this evening?
Yeah, let's put this in context. A few states have not received their full complement of materials. It's not to say they haven't received materials. They have received materials, but in sorting and batching and sorting out, they now found out that some things were actually missing. Not much of it, actually. Just a few items were particularly missing. Either they were misplaced or mislabeled, in which case they were taken to different destinations, but all that is being sorted out, and I think all measures have been put in place to ensure that they get those materials. Since yesterday night, I think most of the states have acknowledged receipts of some of those materials, and I haven't been in touch this morning, so I really don't know what the actual position is, quite honestly, this morning. But I believe by noon, just about all states will have, because since the last couple of days, what we have been doing is saying, look, you're studying our materials, you're getting them in the central bank, you are not allowed to open them or seal them before, except they're in presence of the accredited agents and observers and people who are interested and accredited for that exercise. So when they open it, they now saw some mislabeling and mispackaging. So that is being sorted out, and by today, definitely before noon, all will have been sorted out.
Mr. Osaze-Uzzi, permit me to take you back to the question of card readers. What happens to the data that could be gotten from those card readers? You said they have been configured for use tomorrow. Now, what happens if those card readers are actually used tomorrow by some elements wherever? What happens to the data that will come from them? How will you know? Is there an indexing to know that, okay, these are the card readers that have been stolen, since the card readers still have to be used tomorrow? Are those places where they were supposed to be used in the first place?
I think you got me wrong, actually. I said the carriers had not been configured, as to the best of my knowledge. It is in the last couple of days that we've configured the carriers to start reading from tomorrow. So as at the time of the loss, to the best of my knowledge, they had not been configured. But even if they have, that's a bit of a technical question. Even if they have, they will probably be of no moment, of no use, because each has a specific, I think it's called the IML. There's something they know that our servers will recognize them. And if it's such, if we know the 62 that are missing, when it's programmed, there's no way that our servers will recognize them. They cannot transmit any data to our servers. They'll be knocked out, as it were. Pardon my lack of technical knowledge in terms of the actual terminology to use there, but they will be of no moment, of no use to anybody. You cannot use them. It's only those ones that we have and have been configured for that day that will be of value to anybody.
Yeah, so Mr. Uzzi, I mean, we've heard
the data is not stored. The data is actually stored in our server. So the new card readers that will be programmed will be reprogrammed for the tomorrow's specific election. Okay,
so we've heard the chairman and tell us if he was quoted out of context or not. He said that they will not issue certificates of returns to perhaps states or persons who have been declared under duress, as it were. If he said that, does he have the power to withhold certificates of return if a returning officer in a state has declared someone a winner?
No, we said we will not reward bad behavior. He was not quoted out of context. I think the text of his speech was circulated amongst journalists, and I think channels was there to cover. No, he was not conducted. We will not reward bad behavior. It's as simple as that. Yes, he does have the power. You're not talking of certificate of return, it's talking of a declaration. Now, the law says that when a declaration has been made by a returning officer, that nobody can do anything about that except a tribunal. So if you want to question a return made by a returning officer, you have to go to a tribunal. Correct, no problem with that. But when is a return made? A return is made when the return officer is satisfied that the candidate has met the requirements of law, has satisfied the requirements of law. He makes a return. It's a voluntary act of the returning officer. You cannot point a gun to a returning officer's head and say, sign this, he signs it, and then you say, I have been declared. No, no way. That's an illegality. That is not his act. And because it's not his act, it's induced by that threat of violence, it is not a declaration in law. It's not a declaration in the eyes of the law. It's not a declaration in the eyes of the commission. It is supposed to be a voluntary act. So anybody
Right, I get you. But I understand that we actually do have the chairman of INEC on tape. He was on the news yesterday.
Yes.
Where he did say
Yes.
that they will not issue certificates of return, or they will not give certificates of return to those who have been declared winner under duress. So the question is, by
Yes.
law, he doesn't have that power, or does he?
According to you, I've just told you. I don't know whether you're following my trend of discussion, arguments in this, my position in this. It is not an act of a returning officer. And that not being the act of a returning officer, you cannot invoke the provisions of the law to say that we will not issue a certificate. We only issue a certificate by law where we are satisfied that a returning officer of his own free will has made a declaration, having satisfied himself or herself that the candidate that was returned has satisfied the requirements of law. So if you point a gun to a returning officer, say, that is not his voluntary act. Okay, that cannot stand.
Let me go back to that.
Yes, certainly we do have the power. Let me give you an analogy. If you
just
take
a minute,
a lady now and say you want to marry her, and you force her to sign a certificate of marriage, that is not
just hang on a minute, Mr. Uzi. Let's listen to this so you can respond to it.
Some of the presiding officers were intimidated, some of them were coerced, some of them were forced to throw away the smart card reader. And in some places, what they did was to cancel the votes from that particular polling unit and then forced the commission to go back and reconduct the polls in those areas, which is not supposed to be the case. In the governorship and state assembly elections, any polling unit where the smart card reader is dumped or where the voters in a particular polling unit force the presiding officers not to use the smart card reader, or where there is willful disobedience to the use of the smart card reader from a community, that particular community will score 0 votes in this particular election. So we are going to enforce the use of the smart card reader strictly. The smart card reader is a quality control mechanism.
Okay, well, that's not the one we were talking about. It's supposed to be the chairman of INEC. There was a news at 10 yesterday, which came by read, as a matter of fact, yesterday on the news, so that's not the one. But, Mr. Uzi, so let's get your response. You were making, you wanted to give some analogy on what he meant by they will not issue certificates of return to those who were declared under duress. Go ahead, please.
Yes, what it meant is very clear. It's not ambiguous, it's not equivocal, it's very clear. Now, I'll then give you an analogy of a marriage certificate. Now, if you get married under the Marriage Act, Matrimonial Causes Act, you, if you don't like your spouse again, what you do is go for a divorce. But a marriage that is contracted based on duress, on a gun or threat of violence to a lady or to the second party, is not a marriage. Rather than go for divorce, that thing will be annulled. Because in the eyes of the law, it don't happen. It's not a voluntary act. So when the return officer is forced at gunpoint or knife point or being threatened and he makes a return, that is not a return in law. And we're not bound by law to issue a certificate to that.
But the thing then
that is not his voluntary act. I mean, that is not the requirements of the law have not been met. No certificate of
is it up to
a return will be issued.
Is it up to the chairman to determine whether or not he was indeed, or he declared it under duress? Isn't it up to the courts to do that?
That is one option. That is one option. But you see, administratively, we can take certain decisions. This is an administrative decision that this is not in compliance with the law. If we are wrong, then the courts will correct us. But that will amount tantamount to rewarding bad behavior. Every administrative body has inherent powers to interpret the law to a certain extent. But in terms of disputes arising between them and somebody else or between two parties, it's the jurisdiction of the court that you submit yourself to. But in this particular case, we appointed the returning officer. The man says, that is not my act. I didn't do that. I didn't do that as a voluntary act. So administratively, we have taken that decision. Of course, we are subject to the law. If a dissatisfied person or candidate feels he has a case to answer, he will go to court. And then, if the court compels us, of course we will do it. If the court rules on it, interprets the law and says we're right, it stands. If it says we're incorrect, INEC was incorrect, then we'll do what the court says.
All right. So
we're not the final decision makers in this regard. The court is still there.
Assuming a returning officer in a state issued a certificate of return after declaring the results for any candidates in the last elections, was it wrong for them to have done that under duress?
Look, let's get our terms correct. A return officer does not issue a certificate of return.
No, if they declare
It issues
them
a
winner.
declaration. It declares a result. It is the chairman of the commission that issues a certificate of return. After you declare a result, ECHE, that's a declaration of result, you now issue a certificate of return.
Yeah, what I'm asking is, if in the event that the returning officer declares the result under duress, I mean,
Yes.
and some argue that, could they not have resisted, or even if you say, look, I'm declaring this result under duress, and as a result, it's not valid. So if INEC had issued that certificate of return at the time, would it be wrong to have done it?
Yes, to me, it would be wrong to, when a person says, I did not make a return, then you cannot issue a certificate. A certificate of return is predicated on a declaration of results. You cannot issue a certificate in vacuum. It's predicated on something. And if that foundation is wrong or is invalid, you cannot issue a certificate. It's like giving a certificate that the person has a degree when he has not sat for exams or has not met the requirements. You don't do that. The certificate is predicated. It's just certifying that this person has met certain basic requirements.